Hey everybody, welcome to Esoteric Vancouver's interview today. And today I have the privilege to invite the lovely Chrystal from Chrystal Raven Studio here today with us. And I'm just going to read Crystal's bio really quickly. And so Chrystal is a mixed media artist who has taken fondly to the mediums of painting, sculpture, and digital artwork. Currently, she is attending Emily Carr University of Arts and Design in Vancouver BC and working on completing her fine arts certificate program. She's very inspired by stirring of nature and with the unseen realms moving us in subtle and also sometimes cataclysmic ways. Her work is to capture the sort of the transient and make it still, right? And moments of, candid posturing, captivating the rewilding of our minds and hearts amidst a time of becoming conscious of our taming. The motifs that express this is the best way, such as love and death, nature core, witch core, Gothic Revival, and Art Nouveau are just styles and themes that's most interesting to her as an artist. So she also has a background in esoteric and mystical as a high priestess and intuitive, and felt called to incorporate this world into her art practice through the creation of her tarot deck, which is called the Vespertine Tarot. After 3 years of work, this is ready to be shared with the public, and so I want to welcome Chrystal to come onto the stage.
Hi, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. And so, usually how we open, we just dive right into the conversation and
absolutely
tell us a little bit about what kind of set you onto this unusual path of the spirituality and then the esoteric, becoming a high priestess and doing what you do right now.
Yeah, I think I felt drawn to paganism, the path of paganism, probably since the time I was a teenager, but I didn't really start doing much with it until in my early 20s. I do feel that it was supposed to be my path in many ways, because when I did step my foot onto it and began to kind of put in some efforts, I found that the opportunities came to me quite simply. Like, the effort was there, but it didn't require much for me to get the supports that I needed. Like, I found a group that was willing to train me without having to look very hard. I found supports along the way. One of my best friends is one of my coveners. And yeah, I get a lot of, I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned a lot about the nature of reality through this lens. So I think for me to be able to condense that as an artist into something that people can play with, that can inspire them in their own respects, is something that I'm passionate about doing. Yeah, so.
Yeah. Oh, this sounds like quite a journey that gets you here and becoming who you are today. And in the back room, I know that you're quite a busy person, because amidst of like your spirituality, your learning, and you're also a mother of 4.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, like I feel like anyone who has more than one in this present time is always like, oh my God,
yeah. I mean, it's a scope. I have an 18-year-old and then I have a 4-year-old, so they're not close in age, but if anything, it's lent to my ability to multitask. So
yes,
I do use that in my business and in my teaching and all the rest of it. So it's worked out good, actually.
Nice. And do you see that what you do in terms of like the spiritual work that you do and the artwork you do, how does that sort of like transition into your, does that have any effect on your family life, or um you know, does your children find it inspiring?
I think it inspires my younger kids. My daughters sometimes will want to create beside me, and I try to encourage that most of the time. Otherwise, I think it just helps because I'm a better person because I do something that I'm passionate about. I think I have a lot more spoons for everybody else when I take care of my own needs and my own, wants, how I would like to use some of my time. So I think it benefits everybody in the long run. It is sometimes a challenge to find the space and time to do things. So I have to really self-advocate for that on a weekly basis to make sure that I have that time cut out. Otherwise, it's easy for it to get absorbed in, everyday life.
That's very true. And so when you do have time, what are some of the typical your typical audience that come to you, or clients or students that seeks your service?
Well, I mean, as far as the art stuff goes, I have a variety of clientele. Some people would definitely be more in line with a pagan type path workings themselves. Others with my indigenous art and stuff, like I do the dream catchers. I have a variety of people that appreciate that, not only indigenous people, but other people as well that would like something authentic. And they can come from all walks of life, certainly. So that's pretty broad. And then, we really haven't got into this, but with the teaching, I do teach classes on paganism. Usually I get mostly people who are interested in learning more about the path for personal reasons.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess for the audience who are sort of just beginning their spiritual journey, or they're about to, so when people realize that you are a high priestess, you are a shaman, that we talk about briefly, that you're incorporating more shamanic practices into your spiritual work, and you're an artist, and you do all the things that you do, what would some of the questions that they ask, like what was some of the first thing that they ask you?
I mean, I get a lot of people. I do get quite a few people. They want to know how I work through stuck energy, because usually I'll have people come to me who've heard a bit of my background story, and they might be in a similar position in their life, or there's something about my story that is reflected in their own experiences. And they might feel like they're missing the tools required to kind of get them back on track, so to speak. So, that can look like different things. We can talk about people who feel like they want to start over, where they might have been following a path for quite some time that they've now realized really isn't reflective of themselves genuinely. I can have people that come to me with heartbreak, not really being able to see the forest for the trees on the other side of that, what moving on from that might look like. I have people who I've spoken to who are dealing with, family members or friends that don't understand their path spiritually. Maybe they come from a very conservative religious background, and they've come across people who have not taken kindly to their truth, and so kind of needing support in how to navigate that kind of stuff as well. And then even just people who are just like, I'm really inspired by the fact that you're out there doing what you're doing, just even artistically, because You know, they know some of what other people might consider impediments on my path. That would include having 4 children. I don't see it that way, but I do see that. I mean, it's a lot on my plate, and I recognize that. And some other people who either don't have kids or they might have 1 or 2, you know, they're just like, well, how do you find the time? How do you, you know, do this, do that? So yeah, it can look like a lot of different things. I think it does, to a degree, require for people to engage with some portion of my story as a person. If they're not necessarily being taught by me in a more classroom traditional sense, then that might be more fundamental. You're looking to learn the fundamentals about things like magic or metaphysics.
Yes, and this is such an interesting, you know, where we come to this part, because I was just reading, I was listening to the audiobook on Hecate, and then there's so much more with what witches or even like spiritual workers, typically we're helping people to transition from one place to the other. Like you said, like you're trying to capture that into your art, and then that's what you try to help other people to realize, you know, how do I move on from one stuck situation to where I want to go. And like I find that people don't necessarily know like the exact, how do I say it? I find that that's just, they may not necessarily understand who we are as a label. Like, I should go to her because she's a physiotherapist, or she's she's the eye doctor, or she fix people's back or whatever. Like, it's not a necessary label like that. However, it doesn't change who we are, as the identity is. We help people transition from one situation to the other, and in a way where sometimes it cannot be explained. Sometimes it's energetically transitioning, and sometimes it's in terms of programming, in terms of your subconsciousness, and I think that's really a beautiful thing that you're doing here, is like through your arts and through your courses that you'll be offering more as the time goes on. And I think that's like things that hopefully people will be looking more for it, and so that you get to help them transition from one stuck place to the other. That's where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I find the right people find you. I think people can overthink a lot of things and assume, like you were saying, well, I need to go to this type of person for this kind of thing. And sometimes that's well and true and fine, but a lot of the times we're attracted to certain people, magnetized towards a certain type of learning. And I think that it's really important for people to learn how to kind of navigate those that magnetism and not deny it. I think a lot of people, if they can't really map out a course where they're going with something, then they'll just avoid doing that work, not recognizing that they're really getting in their own way. So a lot of the work that I do is trying to open people up to their intuition and to recognize what certain feelings, when they come up, how they can be used. And that includes difficult feelings, including triggers, what a lot of people try to avoid, but the triggers are trying to show you things about your own beliefs, and use them in ways that has you become, that it develops self-love, it develops self-advocacy and accountability. And I think if you can develop those things, then you're on the right path to being a person, a genuine person living genuinely, whatever that looks like for you. So that's,
yes.
And I think people are far removed from nature. And as a person who is quite animistic and shamanist, and with my background in shamanism, I do feel that people, to a degree, we're rewilding people's psyches to embrace the creaturehood that's contained within them and alchemize that with her higher knowing. Then it allows us to feel more purposeful. I think people lose the sense of purpose quite often because we're kind of chasing the wrong things.
Yes. And on the note of purpose, there's like I remember, I don't know if you have ever come across it was a TED Talk, and I remember watching the TED Talk, and she said, so the speaker, I don't remember, but people can look it up. It's on how the speaker's belief is on that not everybody has a purpose, like a grand calling purpose.
Yep.
And, you know, is that true? Like, or perhaps, like, you know, maybe we can talk, just like deviate from the conversation a little bit and then talk about it. And then, because then I think this might be a very interesting topic for the audience. It's just that, because then personally, I feel like everybody has a purpose. It just, do you focus on the really, really big purpose, as in like, I'm going to solve world hunger? Or you focus on like a very small thing, which is meaningful to the people around you. That's your purpose, right? And oftentimes it does not have to be grand. That's my point of view. So, you know, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think there's no mistake. We're here. I think that we've come for some general theme explorations and some specifics, but we all have a purpose here. I mean, they're not all going to be grandiose. We're not all meant to be, you know, movers and shakers, so to speak, as far as the collective conscious goes. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with being somebody who impacts a small circle of people in their life. You know, that's just as important, sometimes more important. Because, you know, each person contains the whole. So we need to, you know, look at it less like numbers and look at it, what is the essential impact on the individual. Yeah. You can impact individuals, you know, in profound ways, and they can take that and you can help them develop skills where they can really take those impacts and use it to the best of their abilities. Then I think that's where you start to see a lot of grassroots movements and changes, maybe even more so than just going with groupthink, so to speak, or collective changes, which is important too. It all serves a purpose. But yeah, purposeful. We all have something that we're working towards, and I think it eludes some people, but it's there to be found when you're ready to find it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree, and sometimes you might, like, I might think that this is my purpose, and then down the road it kind of like, oh, whoops, it's not a red car, it's a blue car kind of a situation. Like, I got the car right, but not necessarily the motto and make and the color, you know. And then so as you know, as we grow older, how our experiences start, you know, reshaping us in a different way as we go through different life stages. I find typically that our purpose gets decorated in a more specific way as we lay out the fine prints and then the carvings differently. So it takes on the new life form every time we go through a new life stage. Yeah.
Well, it helps us refine our preferences. I think that's important in manifesting what you really want, is you have to be able to refine what you prefer. And I think it's really important to go down paths without assuming why you're going down them, because I think a lot of people think, well, I'm doing this and it's going to end up this way, and if it doesn't end up this way, I'm going to feel some kind of way about it. And we've all been there and done that, but there's something to be said about following the path. It does have lots of gifts for you on it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was ever meant to lead up to the expectation you've applied to it. And that goes for relationships too.
Oh, I hear you. And then I think it also, you know, before you gain the experience, right? And then we will have all sorts of expectations or fantasy, or we think this is how it is supposed to go down, right? But we never had that experience before, and then we go into an experience, and then we need to slowly start modifying whatever that experience, like that expectation or wish, hope, whatever it is. um and so I totally agree with you, especially in the relationship area. It's just like, before you enter that relationship with somebody, you don't really know how it's going to go down.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah, yeah. And so so this is the part where we start going, like, exploring the different aspect of the topics that we just talked about. And what is the one thing that if you wish to let all of your audience, the people who have come to you for help, if that one thing that they can all have, what is that one thing
That they could all have?
Yeah, just instantly, just like that snap of a finger, that's gonna propel them into the next stage.
That they would have self-love.
Mm.
I think if people struggle with it a lot and we project a lot regarding love, I think when you set yourself up for a lot of things when you've developed a good sense of self-love, including a sense of purpose and advocacy, boundaries, and in a way it fuels the drive to move forward, like including trust. I think people look for a lot of examples in their environment of, well, should I do this? Is it like, can I trust where I'm going with this? Artificially applying that sense of faith onto things or people, when really, if you kind of looked at it from a space where, regardless of what I go through on this path, I know I'm going to have my own back and I'll be okay. I think if people really believed that, there would be less trepidation to following those paths and doing those things for oneself. And I think it would heal a lot of ailments that plague humanity.
Yes. This is so good. I think we found our tagline, because then we talk about that we want to have a tagline for the video.
Yeah.
And I think this is like something along the line of stepping forward with self-love.
Yeah.
Step forward with self-love.
Sure.
And do you have a story of how that becomes sort of the core of who you are today about self-love? Do you have a story that you want to share?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the condensed version. It's a long story, but it's actually a story I'm writing a memoir about. But yeah, I mean, I think it came with the notion of romantic love for me at one point in time in my life. I fell very hard for somebody that catalyzed a lot of change in my life in a short period of time. For those of you who are familiar with the tarot cards, it was definitely a Tower moment. But it did make way for appropriate growth. And I got to enjoy a couple of years close with this individual. And then they decided, based off of some different things that were happening in their life at that time, that they didn't have the space to continue in relationship with me. But instead of telling me that, they ghosted me. And that was devastating for me. Like, if I've been through a variety of things in my life that were devastating, and individuals who shook me to my core. I think that was the most devastating thing for me, because I didn't see it coming at all. And so there was a long period of time where I didn't really heal from it. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of denying it because it was just that painful and confusing for me that I just shoved it down. And then I started working with some manifestation or metaphysical principles about the power of the mind and the way our beliefs carry through to our own behaviors. I started working with some of these ideas more readily, and it brought me to a place with the situation where I felt called to reach out and see if I had things I wanted to say and didn't think that they would answer, but I felt like I needed to say them anyways. So I messaged that person at one point, and then nothing. I didn't hear anything. And then I messaged again a month later with whatever else I felt I needed to say. And then they messaged me back. And that kind of set the tone for what I would say was a spiritual awakening that I had within the next 6 months to a year. I had a plethora of experiences take place. A lot of people would consider them to be supernatural. I had an awakening of my abilities. I had psychics affirming all sorts of things about where I was going with this. And like, they were telling me the same information, but different sources. It was very, very intense. And I have been working with that energy ever since. It's certainly not what it was back in 2017 when it was fresh. I've moved into that space. And I feel like I've embodied it better. But it was interesting. At one point in time, I felt what it really came down to is honoring my heart. And I remember having a conversation with my High Priestess about this person before I had reached out. And I was very upset, and I didn't know what to do with all of these feelings. And she just said, love her. And, you know, there was reasons why I had difficulty with that, aside from the ghosting. My position in you know, I was in, it for a variety of reasons, it didn't feel like it should be the thing that I'm doing. And she said, you know, you've tried to let it go, and you've done all these other things, and the reason it hasn't worked is because that's not what you're supposed to be doing with it. And that this person is supposed to help teach you what unconditional love is. And so I started to try to implement that, make space for my feelings to feel them. It wasn't about running off with this person or necessarily professing my undying love or anything like that. It was just really about making the space to feel it. And one day I had a moment where I was doing some ritual, and I had a red rose, and I was going to dedicate it to this person. And I stopped myself, and I looked at, there's a mirror attached to my altar table. And I looked at myself in the mirror with the rose, and I placed it at my chest, and I gave it to me instead. And I recognized how uncomfortable that felt. And I think it was from that moment that I recognized that a lot of the trouble that I had with this whole thing was that I didn't love myself enough to advocate for the things that I need to advocate for. And regardless of what it looked like on paper, regardless of what it might upset other people or hurt their feelings or upset the status quo or whatever, that I wasn't willing to stand up for myself in all of it. And I'd spent so many years silent. And that's why I feel like when you really, something really hits you and you're kind of in this space where, you know, to really just look at yourself and be like, I love you. And if that doesn't hit home, if you can't say that and feel good about that, it means you have work to do. And I think it's life work, honestly. It's not probably something that you do once or twice or 10 times and you're all better now, and then you never have to go there again. But it is the type of work that, you know, you should mean the most to you. Do the work for your lifetime if you need to.
Yes. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I try to convey that in a lot of my work. In subtle ways. It's not really in your face for the most part, but I think the energy's there in some of it, and I hope to kind of have more of that in practical ways too, that I can help my students, not just my art clients, but my students as well, on what that really means for them. Because it's not going to mean the same thing it means to me, and nor is it going to come about the same ways. So we have to honor that too.
Yes. And I think that's the part where, like, I understand how the modern day culture wants to just have this universal medicine of self-love where there's a checklist of do all these things, that means you love yourself. And then I was like, no, like, it doesn't work that way. Because then, like, how, like, we have, you know, take the example of the love language. We all value our love language, you know, given it different priorities. And so how what one person value may not be what the other person values. So if you listen to someone says, oh, because I love myself, so I buy the things that I want. Maybe they value gifting a lot, and you need something else, right? And for people, I think that the notion of knowing that this could be a lifelong process sometimes is very scary for them. It's kind of like, I thought I already loved myself. What do you mean? And then the next things unfold, and it's like, oh, I guess I don't love myself enough. And then you go on to a different journey. Do you find that necessarily true in your case?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really I don't embrace any kind of perfectionistic model for anything. I think perfectionism is an illusion. I think we've come here as souls to experience processes. And along those journeys, it's really about like taking those steps and acknowledging those steps and celebrating those steps, not just end results or our fixations with goals. I think that's a very societal driven perspective on, like, we're supposed to be productive and we're supposed to be, you know, have these things by certain ages and whatever you want to buy into. But I mean, if we're really getting down to the nitty gritty of it, we're talking about individual people here, we're talking about the heart, it doesn't necessarily have to do with any of that stuff. Not really. They can be stand-in props to kind of serve you to look at and reflect back at you what you feel your own self-worth is and your own self-love. But I think we need to be able to take it deeper than that. And I think one of the main ways that we take it deeper is when it's hard. It's not when things are going necessarily well. It's not when you necessarily have people always affirming how awesome you are. It's when something bubbles up and it hurts. And it's what you do with that really starts to show what your capacity for self-love is. Because a lot of people will run away from it, or they'll pretend like it's not there. And that's really abandoning yourself in the moment. You have to be able to sit with that. Not assume that it shouldn't be there. It's there for a reason. It's there to show you things too, like pain teaches people things, physical pain. Point is to sort of stop having it. I mean, if you burn yourself on the element, don't put your hand back on it right away. But the thing is that emotional pain teaches us things too. We just need to learn how to use it properly. So yeah, I think, you know, it's the proof is in the pudding. Like, it's easy to love when the loving's easy, right? But when it's hard and people start, you know, people beat themselves up a lot when things get hard. It's like if you projected that out to, say, your kid, right? You're having a hard time. Are you going to start, you know, booting them around the living room because you're frustrated? I hope not. But why would you do it to you? You know, why would you basically proverbially take the same kind of actions and do it to yourself? And when you kind of put it in that context, it's like, wow, maybe you're right. That's not a very loving thing to do. And yet it becomes so habitual for people that they don't even see it that way anymore. And you become like some kind of punching bag for yourself. So yeah, I think you really have to take it from day to day, from week to week. Things are going to come up. And I get, like, sometimes, you know, lifetime work stuff. I mean, I guess it's daunting when you don't have a great relationship with lifetime work. I think, you know, if you're really committed to something and you've learned to develop a relationship with it that's, again, purposeful, then it's not awful. It's not awful anymore. It's just sort of like you develop that kind of space to just do the work. But the development takes a while. Like, I've been working with this energy for 14 years, so and would I say I'm some sort of completed project on it? Absolutely not. It just keeps unfolding my path more and more and more and more. You know? So
when you were talking about self-love, and one of the image that came into my mind was kind of like it's, you know, in your darkest moment, the amount of work that you have done on loving yourself is kind of that first aid bandage that you're going to put on yourself first. And if the bleeding doesn't stop right there, you are going to be able to at least walk far enough to the next hospital, find the next healer to help you solve your problem. But then that was like the first aid that you're gonna, emergency first aid that you're gonna need to stop your wound from bleeding, and then search for options.
There's definitely something to be said to also recognize in the moment where you're going somewhere with something in the mind, you know, before it gathers momentum. Like, I find that to be very helpful if you can kind of recognize where you're going with something when it's relatively fresh, rather than, say, 6 hours into having, you know, a crisis about something. Then the more you can do with it. Otherwise, you know, if it gets too much momentum, sometimes the best you can do is just sleep it off. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't always have all the tools. And, you know, I don't believe that, you know, when something kind of revisits, oh, it's, you know, I've not learned anything, I'm back to square one kind of thing. You're never in the same place twice. It has resemblances. You're taking theme, like, and that's why it doesn't matter where it comes from, if it comes from your past or whatever. If it's here now in your current experience for any reason, then it's there for a reason to be utilized. And just to just recognize that you've already gotten somewhere with this. So what have you learned? Maybe there's just more for you to learn with it. That's all.
And sometimes it's just the packaging missing one word. It's, you know, like trying to have like a better sentence. And like, for example, I remember that, you know, going through a really long relationship, and then, you know, trying to forgive, forget, and then, you know, move on, understand and accept, you know, all those good jazz stuff, emotional healing. And I think I did all that the first time going. And then I had another moment where I was like, why is this person still, like, their energy is still in my stratosphere? And then I was like, okay, fine, let's redo all that again. And then in the second time doing it, like you said, literally the first question is, what did I not do? What did I do wrong, or what did I not do? Why is this coming back? And then I realized it's, you know, for me in that level, it's more about just being very honest with, I didn't call the person or anything, but through the 5D, that's what I was trying to do, is like, having the honesty and the care, and then for myself, and just say, hey, look, I'm fine right now. I love myself right now. I don't worry about me, right? And then, or you don't have to reach out. I'm fine right now. And then in that sincere moment, I literally send that message through the 5D, was that, I want you to be fine too with whatever you're doing. Like, I wish you well. I just prefer not to have any contact from this point on. And then that was really like the second time was the one that was done, I guess not done right, but to both end of that energy connection, was that we finally have a resolution. So it's not necessarily the that, like you said, like, when things repeat, it's not necessarily like a bad thing. It's just that you find a different way. Sometimes you just have to say it the second time, say it the third time. Third time is the charm, and to get that completion. So it is the journey, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take as long as it's going to take. And that's one of the things I try to tell people, is that to help have that compassion for everybody. We all have our own challenges, and some people, get over different things a lot quicker, and they just have a different mental makeup. They have a different personality. They have a different background that might allow for maybe releasing of certain energies a lot faster, where you have other people who are very different. You might have people with trauma that complicates everything. And so not to compare yourself to other people either, and where they're at with their journey with things. I find that that's just, for the most part, really not helpful with pretty much anything. Yeah, and honesty. If, like, I do believe in practicing radical honesty, in particularly on oneself, and because we do bullshit ourselves a lot with things, I think, and you're only aware of what you're aware of, and that bubble, that sphere, can be limiting until you're working with it properly, and then it expands, and then you kind of look back and you're like, huh, I was really telling myself that 2 years ago, or whatever. But at the time, it just seemed like you're convinced,
Mm-hmm.
So we're unfolding too as people. Like, as we expand, we all of a sudden see more of ourselves. And we see a lot more good things, but we also see more things where we're just like, okay, what's this about? Like, what's this part of my personality? Like, I don't know this part very well. And it might be a little unsavory even. Well, based off of our own judgments of what unsavory is, but and then we get to work with that too. So yay.
Yes, definitely. And so I'm just gonna, we have come to this part where we need to wrap up. And so before we leave this conversation, is there any parting wisdom, the last sort of piece of wisdom that you want to bestow onto our audience here today, and sort of share that with us?
Oh, parting wisdoms. I don't know. I think I've said a lot of wisdoms, I suppose, but I guess I would say don't listen to naysayers. Like, don't let that get the better of what you're excited about, whatever that is, whatever you're excited in developing for yourself, whether it's a business or a practice or a hobby or whatever it is. There's probably 9 naysayers to every one person will be encouraging, and they're usually that way for their own reasons. that they need to work out. But you know, you start adopting that kind of mentality and you believe it, it becomes more believable than the opposite of fact of that you believe in, that you are excited and passionate about those things for a reason. Then, you know, the universe will affirm what you believe. So there's always examples of people who are critical and what have you, and they'll have all these facts about, well, this is why I feel this way, and they'll call themselves realists or whatever. And then you'll have people who live relatively optimistically and they don't really listen to naysayers, and then they have all these kinds of examples, whether they're anecdotal or facts or whatever, and they support their journey. And so it really comes down to, what do you want supporting your journey? What kind of mentality? So, but I'll tell you, one fast way to kill most aspirations is to start believing in naysayers. So don't do it.
Yeah, and you know, to add on top of that, we need to be our best cheerleader.
Oh yes, yeah, you need to be able to be that example for yourself before anybody else jumps on the bandwagon. It's nice when you have family and friends and stuff that are like, yeah, I think what you're doing is awesome, but you know, some people don't have that. And that doesn't mean that these people, you know, some people have severe adversities and, you know, they come out on top too. And why is that? Well, again, all different personal stories, but I bet you one thing that they all have in common is they believed that they could.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just believe in what you're doing. It's there, you know, follow that excitement.
Follow the excitement, that's it. Okay. Thank you, Chrystal, for joining us this afternoon and sharing your lovely, lovely wisdom and insights with us. And we'll, you know, we hope to invite our audience here to come and see you and, you know, really get a look at your artwork, what you have to share with them at the Esoteric Arts Fair on July 21st. And we'll see you around.
Yeah, excited. Bye.
Okay, bye.